Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing coverage of House of the Dragon. This week we have our mid-season finale for Season 2, The Red Dragon and the Gold. I'm always excited when they use a chapter title from the book. This is our first big-ass battle episode, and we have so much to talk about. As of right now, this is the highest-rated episode of the entire series online by the fandom, so I don't think we're alone here in this opinion, but I want to set the table. I want to ask Maggie and Tristan, who are here with me, of course, I want to ask them what they think of the battle. But first, I want to say something stupid and provocative so they can fight me on it, even though I wholeheartedly believe it. This is not a devil's advocate thing. I believe this.
I'm very excited.
So I wanted to start, because it's our first big battle episode of the show, I want to start with a wide-angle lens here. Because my contention is that
there's no video. It's a podcast.
My contention is that this is the perfect battle for this series at this moment, because it plays to the tone and pacing that we've loved so much through Season 1 and on and off in Season 2 of the show. It feels unsustainable. It feels condensed. It's disastrous. This feels like a battle we would have gotten 3 or 4 seasons into Game of Thrones.
Yep.
But with this accelerated pacing, this feels like a genuine, tectonic shift in the war that only just began. Allison has a line in this episode of 3 weeks ago. Viserys was alive and I was just chilling. So let's put this battle into context compared to previous battles in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. I had to do research on this because I don't remember anything. Every episode we do is my first episode. We do episodes on Fire and Blood over on Patreon. I don't remember anything that has happened in that book so far. I'm going in fresh every single time.
You've got a pretty horrific memory.
It's like a goldfish.
I'm impressed that you could get through life.
So the first battle, basically I'm pitching these battles with who died to remind you of what happened, what the takeaways are from our big landmark watershed battle so far. The first big one we have is Blackwater. And basically, if you boil it down, some people die who we don't really care about. And the big thing is that Stannis' invading force is pushed back and King's Landing defends itself.
Also, Tyrion gets his big scar.
Yeah,
There's
that's
that.
Not a death.
So yeah, but it's his nose in the book.
Yeah, it's much worse.
And it makes him look cooler.
Yeah,
it's an anime scar. It's awesome.
Way better in this show.
If we jump forward a couple seasons, we get to Hardhome. Hardhome's really cool and really scary, and I watched it with Tristan in person. But if you zoom out, nothing really happens. White Walkers look cool, and we find out that people come back from the dead when you kill them, but basically our heroes just flee the White Walkers. So it's a big scary battle, but on paper it doesn't really change the war that much. If you then jump forward to Battle of the Bastards, this is the big one. This is the highest rated battle in all of Game of Thrones.
As it should be.
The best one.
Yeah, and you have more deaths here. You have Rickon Stark dying. You have Ramsay Bolton dying. But that's pretty much it of people we care about.
Yeah,
For
but
the audience, I do want to let everybody know Maggie gave an of disgust to Rickon.
No,
completely silent with Ramsay. Completely silent.
I thought it would be uncouth to cheer, so I didn't do that.
At the child's?
No, at Ramsay. At Ramsay.
Okay.
My God.
We also have the Watchers on the Wall, the episode at the end of season 4. In that one, we lose Ygritte, Pip, and Gren.
Okay, that's huge.
Which is 3 characters who don't matter at all to the overall shape of the war.
But it's Jon's entire chosen family.
Sure.
It's his whole thing.
So it matters a lot to the interpersonal life of one protagonist. As far as shifting the tide of the geopolitics of the world and the face of the war, it doesn't really have any effect on our principal characters. Next big battle is the Battle of Winterfell.
In the long night, like the big one?
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
We lose Lyanna Mormont, who then comes back in the Last of Us show. We lose Beric Dondarrion. We lose Melisandre. We lose Theon. We lose Jorah. And we lose the Night King, who doesn't exist.
Didn't we actually lose Melisandre? I can't remember. How did she die, or did she just walk off into the sunset?
No idea. Didn't read that part. So we lose a bunch of
truly don't remember.
a bunch of characters we like, but does that change it that much? The Night King, I guess, would be the biggest one there.
I mean, yeah, that's very significant.
The other ones are interesting, Theon and Jorah. That matters to us, but that's not changing the course of a war.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
The next battle is probably the strongest contender, and that's the fall of King's Landing. That's the battle that is chronicled in the episode called The Bells.
Yes.
In that battle, technically, you lose Euron Greyjoy, who is the figurehead of this big invading force.
Yeah.
You lose Jaime and Cersei Lannister. You lose the Hound and the Mountain.
Unceremoniously.
Yeah, because a floor collapses.
Oh, no.
You lose the Hound and the Mountain. You lose Varys in that episode, and you lose Qyburn when the Mountain kills him.
Yeah.
So that one has a lot of deaths, again, and some of them I think are more arguable. But here's the curveball. If this is how we're measuring what happens in battles and how important they are, this episode of House of the Dragon, which has the Battle of Rook's Rest, if I'm reading you the numbers and trying to draw a line under everything that happens here, we effectively lose 2 dragons here. We lose Rhaenys, who represents the power of Driftmark with Corlys, and one of the only Old Guard wise advisors that Rhaenyra has.
Yeah.
We might have lost Aegon II. We might have lost a king who's the figurehead of one half of the Civil War. Oh, and there's arguably a royal coup, given what Aemond does to Aegon. So my contention to you guys, and this is where I want to cede the floor, I know I've talked too much here, is it fair to call this Battle of Rook's Rest the most consequential single battle in the history of House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones put together?
Well, you're sort of leading the witness a bit with that
Yes,
framing.
I am.
But
Objection.
I mean, I think... I guess it depends on what you mean by... No.
No.
I think it depends...
Obviously, killing the Night King is has broader repercussions than this battle here, because that could have been a world-ending. I mean, that literally averted the meteor from colliding with Earth.
Right, like they stopped the apocalypse.
You know, the difference here is one kingdom and who's effectively ruling it, and it really only matters to the two parties waging the war. All the peasants life's still gonna suck for them.
Right.
All of the houses in between, especially the ones that aren't siding with anybody, they're gonna be fine. This is really only a civil war for who's the figurehead of the kingdom.
Well, right, especially because the whole episode and all of this season has been sort of highlighting how powerless Aegon really is as a king. Yeah. He actually can't do anything and has no effect. And the second he tries to do something, he gets set on fire. And so the understanding seems to be that even if Aegon does die here, the Greens will continue on and keep doing what they're doing, and not a lot will change. I also think that Cam, by consequential, I guess if you mean politically, I could see the argument. But as far as our characters go, I don't think so. Especially because, not that I'm not invested in the characters here, but I think something like Battle of the Bastards is way more consequential for our characters than it is than this battle is. It's satisfying several seasons of revenge and character arc, and it's a big revenge thing, and it's also incredibly consequential for obviously the Starks with losing Rickon, but also with Jon, it's really essential for his character. It's really essential for Sansa, for her. It's really big for her, and Theon. And it's about getting Winterfell back. It's a lot. I think it's way more consequential.
2 dragons, a key advisor,
I'm not saying
and
this
possibly a king.
I'm not saying this isn't consequential.
I would say that it's fair to put this battle in that conversation.
Yeah,
and I think you can't put it above the Long Night, or whatever the battle is called when they kill the Night King. Spoilers. But I thought that would be a good time to throw that one in
this
there.
Is the moment where we say it.
So I think that one trumps pretty much everything else. And you can put Dany's sacking of King's Landing up there too, as
sure.
sort of a direct consequence of that victory. If you look at the pieces on the board for the show, and I guess the geopolitics of what's going on right now, absolutely. If this was a chess game, right? Rhaenyra just lost her queen. If Meleys and Rhaenys are supposed to be the best, the biggest dragon and the best fighter with the most experience and the most knowledgeable advisor, that's devastating for the Blacks, because the rest of Rhaenyra's council seems to be sort of at odds with her. They can't really agree. Also, and at a fourth wall breaking level, I don't know who the hell any of them are except for Corlys.
It's true. They haven't spent enough time on them. I don't know who they are either, and I read the book.
Yeah. So, they've created this weird othering within the Blacks, where I'm I don't give a shit what you say, War Council. Let's listen to the characters who I actually know, because they're probably going to have a better take anyway. Versus the conflicts that have been set up with the Greens are very similar in that, but I also understand why the War Council disagrees with the tactics that were planned, but then they ultimately come to an agreement. It's not overtly antagonistic like with the blacks it seems to have been set up. So maybe there's this, and we know like the writers this season like have been playing a lot with the treatment of women and power and things like that, so they could be trying to more so make that point here if Rhaenys is really the most trusted advisor because she gets it. Regardless, all of that is to say that this is a huge loss for the blacks. The greens really haven't lost anything at all because Alicent was exactly right. All that Aegon had to do was nothing. Literally, I mean, it was really harshly put, but she was right. Oftentimes, that is the role that a king plays in a war like that. But like I said, to bring it back to the chess analogy, he's not even really the king in that game.
Right.
He's a pawn or like a bishop at best.
I mean, he's a symbol. Like, he's just a figure.
But if they have lost him, we don't know if Aegon is off the board or dead at this point. If the Greens did lose him and the throne is thrown into turmoil and the succession question comes up again, wouldn't most of Westeros now just say, okay, so Rhaenyra gets it?
No, I don't think so. That's what I was trying to say. I think that they'd then be like, okay, I guess Aemond gets it. Like, they would still want to be going
he
by...
has a male heir, right?
Oh, yeah, it's true. Well, not anymore. He was killed.
Aemond would kill. Aemond would blood and cheese that kid in a second.
Jaehaerys was killed, so he no longer has one.
Isn't there another?
There is in the book. There's not in the show.
So there's a girl, which would be the Rhaenyra thing all over
right.
again.
So I think they would want to like continue to honor like the Greens' position of like, well, you know, Viserys named Aegon, and also we believe that in like, you know, primogeniture, and it should be the male heir. And so I think it would just go to Aemond. Like, I think that the Green Council would really push that. They wouldn't be like, okay, I guess we lost. Rhaenyra gets it. I think the other reason I'm having a hard time with this question is because I think a lot of like, we want to zoom out, a lot of really important, like significant consequential moments that happen in this world are not on the battlefield. Like, I think one of the most significant moments is like the Red Wedding or blowing up the Sept of Baelor. Like, it's stuff like that where it's like massacres and murders and assassinations. Like, it's not actually battles where the really significant stuff happens. And that's a whole point in this book. The Maester writing Fire and Blood says like a big chunk of this, like a big majority of this war was not fought on the battlefield, but like in stairwells, and like it's blood and cheese. It's not this battle. This battle is really significant, certainly, but I think that's why I'm having a hard time giving it the amount of significance that you're giving.
But that's why I'm giving it that significance. I knew you guys would disagree, but I honestly expected you to say that the fall of King's Landing was the more striking contender. I didn't expect you to say Battle of Winterfell, because for me, the entire lesson of the last season of Game of Thrones is that it was never about the Night King. I wanted Game of Thrones to be an absolute graveyard blowout of the White Walkers killing everyone. I've always said that. It wasn't that, and it wasn't that by the third episode. And then half of the rest of the season was all the devastating, horrible things people do to each other, where to the fact that Daenerys doing the bells and blowing through King's Landing on Drogon, I think that is much more effective than anything about, and consequential, than killing the Night King. Because I think that the focus absolutely shifted away from the White Walkers the longer they were a threat on the board, weirdly enough. I think they stopped being this existential Walking Dead zombie crisis and became just kind of this, I don't know, thing, albatross hanging around the series' neck.
Yeah, well, I see what you're saying, right? Because like for the way the show ended up itself, I mean, you're right. I mean, you lose that momentum. That's sort of the climax, and then the rest of the episodes are the following action, right, to get us to Bran the Broken, which everybody has their own opinion. I'm thinking of the meme with the horse that's drawn really well for the first 3 panels, and the last one just I still don't think that takes away from the significance in universe of what that fight was. I mean, think about all of the buildup with all of the characters that think about when you watch that episode. All the characters that you really cared about and loved all being there in the same place fighting what seemed to be a losing battle until, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Arya comes in, right? I mean, that was pretty incredible because we all understood the stakes, and only those characters there understood those stakes. Yeah, nobody else in the entire world knew that was going on, so obviously it's not consequential to them in that moment, but we know that they saved the entire world, and it's what enables Daenerys to go sack, King's Landing. Sure. Like, that is a direct aftermath of them succeeding at this battle, and that's why I think that in the Game of Thrones universe, between everything that I just talked about and the fact that that's the culmination of the prince that was promised prophecy, right? I mean, it is the exact thing that George R.R. Martin set up to be the primary event of the entire series.
Totally.
So I think that we're doing it short shrift if we say that this one couple of years civil war that played out the way that it did, it was just a succession crisis that was ultimately resolved by the end of it. I think objectively that is bigger, but you still here effectively have two nukes being loosed, right? You've got, what is it, Fat Boy and Big Man, or Big Boy and Fat, Little Man and Fat Boy?
I played Fallout 3.
I was like,
exactly.
what are y'all talking about? Okay.
It was the names of the atomic bombs that were
I was
dropped.
like, are these dragon nicknames? I don't know what's going on.
No,
Okay.
That's what we call each other when you're not on the pod.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, me and Fat Boy.
All right.
No, so you have those being loosed, and we get to see sort of through Cole how serious that is, and then with the death of somebody so major, that's such a striking scene to see. Not only her and her dragon die, but it also destroys the stronghold that Rook's Rest that they were trying to protect as she falls. I thought that was a great symbolic gesture too for everything that meant, right? I mean, that with that one blow, there's a lot that has crumbled structurally for the Blacks. Yes, for this show, it is very important, but for the entire history of Westeros, I think that your question necessarily has to mean that the fight against the Night King was more important.
I think you're right, both of you, ultimately, but a part of the unfairness, now that we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it, is that this is a television conversation because we don't have the source material for that battle that we're talking about at Winterfell. So it might just be, I mean, the Night King doesn't exist in the books. There isn't a figurehead that ends the world-threatening plague, but I think because we're so used to end-of-the-world stories, I was already hyped for either everyone's going to die or some people are going to die. I think this one was more striking to me because, like you said, Tristan, this is just a piddly little castle, and it turns into a battle that takes two dragons, the biggest advisor, and possibly a king off the board. I think that's why it felt consequential, because by that point that we got to the Battle of Winterfell and Game of Thrones, everything felt a little rushed. We had those shorter seasons. They were past the books, which is not their fault, but they were riffing in a way that they were not so good at when they signed up to adapt this series. Whereas this episode is coming from a book where the full story is right there. You can perfectly assemble the season. And this episode has such fantastic verbal jousting. It had the great writing. It had the great character moments, the council meetings, the room for all this development of characters. I think that's why this one stuck out to me so much.
Yeah, I could see that, especially because something like Battle of the Bastards or The Long Night, the battle is the entire episode. And here the battle is only the last 10 minutes. And so you're right, you get to have all that important character work and also the battle. So it kind of ends up feeling a lot more important. Whereas, not that I'm not enjoying watching an hour and a half long battle on the screen, but at the end of it, you're like, okay, but what really happened? After that, visual feast that I got, what significantly has changed? And again, those two battles are very significant, but I totally see what you're saying here, especially when it is just this piddly little battle for this stupid little castle.
Yeah.
It does end up becoming a lot bigger a lot more quickly.
Who won the battle for this piddly little castle? Can we move to the first poll question here? Who actually won the Battle of Rook's Rest? The Greens or the Blacks?
Do you want to see what the audience said first?
Yes, please.
So the audience, we always ask these on our Instagram and over on YouTube. On YouTube, we only ask one question, so I don't think this was on our YouTube, but it was on our Instagram.
We're adjusting.
Yeah, we're adjusting.
We're still growing over there.
And we got 78% said the Greens and 22% said the Blacks.
What do you guys think of that?
Well,
It's absolutely the Greens.
yeah, I was going to say, I know because I read the book, technically, historically, this is a victory for the Greens. But it so doesn't feel like it. It feels like a total collapse of the Greens with what happens with Aemond especially. I think it demonstrates that they are not organized, that Kristen Cole does not know what he's doing, and that they kind of just won accidentally.
But you do think they won?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think... I mean, I agree with you in that I think that the Greens won. But I disagree with that it feels like they're disorganized. I mean, they had their plan ready to go. The only reason that it runs afoul is because Aegon decides that he's going to get drunk fly his dragon on and kill somebody. That decision is just him. He did the one thing that he wasn't supposed to do, which was anything other than nothing. And so, yes, but him being the loss and his dragon's the bigger loss of the two of them. And regardless of if he's still alive, which I think soap opera rules apply, we didn't see him dead, so he's still alive. And so is his dragon, who is still breathing. The dragon would be the bigger loss there. But, even if he had died, it wouldn't really matter at least for the integrity of what the Greens are trying to do. Obviously, it might create succession questions, but at the end of the day, I mean, the people who are really in charge are still there. You've still got Criston Cole. You've still got Aemond, who is the real secret weapon that the Greens have anyway. You still have Vhagar. Vhagar doesn't even really appear to be injured.
Sure.
God, and that slow motion scene. That was so cool, the entire shot. I was like, oh my god, this is so you talk about cool shots and like the cinematography.
Beautiful. It was so beautiful. No, I can see what you're saying. I think what's getting for me is like if your king doesn't know what your plans are on the battle, then that's a problem, right? Because it does not seem like Aegon knew that Aemond was going to swoop in. That seemed to come as a big surprise for him. And then of course Aegon's appearance was also a surprise for everybody. So the fact that our king doesn't actually know what the battle plans are, wasn't invited to said battle, doesn't tell anybody that he's coming. Like, obviously the problem is Aegon, but if your king is that erratic and even like nobody's communicating with each other quite properly, I think that demonstrates, especially because, I mean, did you see what happened to the Greens when Meleys showed up? They were like, screw it, everybody run. Like nobody knew what to do. Yeah, it was like Monty Python. Like Criston Cole knew that Aemond was coming, but he hadn't told anybody else that Aemond was coming. So, like, if they had known they had Vhagar on their side, they wouldn't have all fled and scattered. So it seemed like a bit of a mess for them. It just kind of happened to win from luck, and they had 2 nukes instead of 1. I don't know. I didn't find it to be... And I don't think this puts them in a very good place now, especially because Aemond basically tried to commit regicide in front of everybody twice.
I also don't think, though, that even if they knew that Vhagar was on their side and was there to help out, I mean, these are still people who have never, ever, ever, like, seen dragon battle in real life.
Yeah.
And if you see one of those fuckers flapping towards you...
yeah, I mean, I'm running.
You're going to hold the line and try to continue laying siege to this castle?
It just felt like they had no plan for what to do, though. They were like, fuck it, dragon. Like, they didn't know. Nobody knew what to do. I think it demonstrates that they were not prepared the way that they should have been.
The communication was bad, but I think that was part of the plan. I think Criston Cole does not give a shit about the common soldiers who were in the army, right? He wants this dragon. He's fighting this war. These soldiers, just like all the peasants, are expendable, so they are being used as bait to draw out one of the nukes that the blacks have, and he wants to take that off the board. That is way more consequential than whatever happens to these idiots. They don't need to know. In fact, he's lying to them throughout the entirety of the battle to try to keep them motivated to keep on going forward so that his plan can work.
He was like, your king is here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
And he knows he's lying to them in that moment. So he has absolutely, and we know that this character doesn't have any scruples at this point anyway.
I was going to say, I think I just don't like Criston. I think I'm just like, you suck. And so I just assume he's bad at what he's doing. I mean, he is, but...
I don't think it was tactically a bad move. I think it was kind of screwed up by Aegon showing, which none of them could have calculated for, because even though they didn't fill him in on the plan, he hasn't really been acting as a loose cannon. He's sort of kowtowed to everybody else's authority. Despite railing against it, he ultimately goes along with everything that's said. This is the first time that he really did anything about it. Obviously, it was in a colossal way, but nobody expected him to do that. And I don't think that has anything to do with the lack of leadership or planning for this specific event. Or lack of foresight, rather. I don't think anybody could have seen it coming. At the end of the day, it was a good plan because they did exactly what Criston Cole thought that they would do. You know,
his plan was good. Aegon messing it up wasn't good. I think I agree with both of you in principle. I was worrying after I asked the question if the answer of who won the battle was contingent on whether or not Aegon lives or dies. But I'm
No.
like, we're doing Game of Thrones on Fridays. We're going chapter by chapter through that book. Check out those episodes. And obviously, I mean, we're pretty early on the book, so Robert Baratheon is still there. And we just saw him at a tourney. And the way people interact with him, the way they kind of dismiss him as a big, dopey drunk, but they do still kind of respect him because of his history in battle. When he talks about his warhammer, when they talk about his success on the Trident, riding down the last Targaryen, I think there's something there where optically we've almost had like a pearl clutching kind of sensibility towards royalty so far this season, where people are turning on the blacks or the greens, depending on who last murdered a child. But I think there is something about being shaken by your leader not seeming strong. And I think Aegon riding into battle and immediately getting shot down and losing, I think that will shake him and the negotiating power of everyone on his side. Yes, you can still point to he has Aemond and he has the biggest dragon in Vhagar, but I do think this really shakes that power if you have these sort of finger to the wind sort of vassal lords making a decision whether to support Aegon or Rhaenyra right now. I think this does shake that faith in Aegon and the institution he represents.
Yeah, I could see that. And then, you could like you could call Aegon a kinslayer for like killing Rhaenys, because he is related to Rhaenys. They're like cousins.
Well, they're all related.
Because she's Viserys' cousin, right? So he could say, oh, he's the kinslayer, and she was trying to fight for the right cause, and he, savagely killed her. So yeah, I could.
But I think that you can also play that argument the other way. I mean, I think that this shakes faith in the blacks just as much. I mean,
yeah,
because they're really on the losing side of this. They lost for sure a dragon,
right,
and for sure a counselor.
Also,
probably the foremost counselor.
Right. Also, their queen, their monarch, did not show up at the battle.
Good point.
Rhaenyra was hiding a dragonstone in their view, right? So, Aegon showed up. He didn't do so great, but he was there. He made an appearance, and Rhaenyra just sent somebody else. So I could see it going both ways.
I want to hit this question from a different angle, because I think we've done the kind of zoomed out look of the blacks and the greens, but most of our conversation is about individual characters. And I want to, if you give me a little runway here, I want to hit it from a different angle. Because when I looked at the poll question, because, then I log back into my own Instagram and I try to answer the questions, and sometimes it's weirdly difficult. I think the answer is incredibly complicated here. Because if I go back to the comparisons to the history of the previous battle episodes in the franchise, I agree with you guys. I was thinking about the Battle of the Bastards so much during this episode, and the thing that made me feel uncomfortable and disloyal and gross and filthy and dirty was that Cole was positioned like Jon Snow.
Yeah.
And that's great, because Cole is our lead in this episode, in this battle, but he's certainly not a hero.
No.
And I love that reversal of framing. I mean, even visually, we give him similar facial hair. We give him Jon's big-ass armor, slightly different color. We have the slow motion. We have the heavy breathing. We get everything except the pile of bodies that Jon is stuck in the middle of. And the big difference is that he doesn't have the noble purpose where we sympathize with Jon. We valorize Jon. He gets the moment of pulling the sword out against the wall of horses. Best shot in any fantasy thing ever made.
It's true.
But it's also the other visual, and I couldn't get over this, was the haircut. His hair's different. And I think that represents something. In my notes, I'm calling it a moral haircut.
Probably also not insured.
It's true.
Probably not. But like Kristen starts out with this long, luxurious hair similar to Jon. It's not as curly, but he's got great hair.
But and
now it looks dreadful.
Yes, but that's the shift. In the same way he lacks the noble purpose, he's given this sort of moral haircut. He's not a guy that we believe in and fight for. And I think this tracks with the overall differences between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. Because this show, as we keep talking about, I mean, this is chronicling one civil war over a couple-year period. It's much more insular. It's a more character-focused show with a much smaller and more regal ensemble. And that tighter focus goes further, where I don't think this battle was really about the blacks and the greens so much. I think this battle in particular was about that second phase of the Civil War, where it was really a battle within the greens. We already talked about that, sort of introducing these major players of Cole, Aemond, and Aegon, that it was really this strategic war between these three treacherous, ambitious players. And this is where I think the title sort of flips on his head. Instead of asking who won Rook's Rest, the Blacks of the Greens. If you're thinking about the Battle of the Bastards and the way it's inverting so much of that symbolism and visual language, I think the question becomes, between Cole, Aemond, and Aegon, who's the bigger bastard? And
Nice.
through that lens, I think it's Aemond by a landslide.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, like, Kristen's a little shit, but Aemond is like a true villain, and he is a bad, bad man. Because, like, Kristen is slimy and two-faced and foolish at times and has killed people in rages. That's true. We saw him do that. But Aemond is on a different level. And Aemond, I really enjoyed the way that they did this, because we were saying this before we started recording. The way that Aegon is injured in the show is not the same as in the book. In the book, he is injured. It's the exact same. But it really is not, it does not say that Aemond did it. And not only that, I think the show makes it pretty clear that Aemond is doing it on purpose, very like heavily contrasted with the way he accidentally kills Viserys at the end of season 1. Like in season 1, it's like he doesn't have control over Vhagar, and he's just like, Vhagar, no! Like he's trying to taunt. We did this whole thing when this happened. Like he's like taunting Luke and being like a real dick to him, but when Vhagar kills him, he's like, oh shit, that is not what I meant to do. And here he like points his dragon at Aegon and says like, Dracarys, like do it. Yeah. And it's like very clear that he wants him dead. And even at the end, Kristen like stops him from like finishing him off with his sword. So he's the real
multiple shots
here.
On goal.
This is a very clear transition to this war, at least as far as on the green side, is now firmly in the hands of Aemond and the Targaryens. This was a colossal power shift because Criston Cole was absolutely robbed of any agency he's ever going to have from now on. The introduction of dragons means that he and his ground forces are almost meaningless. And I think that realization hits him when he's knocked off his horse and he's unconscious and he's looking around. And then he goes to tap this guy on the shoulder and he just fucking disintegrates because he's been obliterated with dragon fire, right? You see Criston Cole absolutely realizing in this moment that his importance in this overall story, to the extent that he ever had any, is zero. -1, right? And I mean, if you think about his story, you know, writ large over from the beginning of season 1 and everything, he has been on a weird vengeance kick since, you know, near the end of season 1, and that's carried him way farther than I think he ever intended for it to. Because he accidentally became king, and was he going to say no? You know, because he's got this whole complex in him that he doesn't have any honor anymore, but he tries to pretend like he does. So maybe accepting something like this will help him earn some of it back. We don't get to see any of that, and you know, I think to the detriment of the character. And now there's probably not a lot written on him in the books, but he's become kind of one note. I think this is a really, really important event for him because I think it'll give him the chance to have some more layers, because he's become sort of a static character. He's still on this vendetta, you know, the whore of Dragonstone. You know, he and I love that they gave him that line because it's a subtle reminder he still sort of feels spurned by Rhaenyra.
I was gonna say that's his whole origin story. Is he's mad that Rhaenyra used him for sex, and now he's like, and that ruined him as this honorable knight, and now he's mad forever.
And that's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't think that his, like, the way he was slighted and his anger about all that feels like it should have been way smaller and more private, but he's sort of let it take him into the second most powerful position on,
funny.
You know,
it works.
One of the two civil warring factions. But I think we're going to see him take a back seat from here on out because he necessarily has to. He's out of his depth whenever you're talking about a dragon now. And that's just my point here. I just think it's kind of it's funny to see him get sort of a comeuppance, but now have to live with the consequences of understanding now that he is meaningless.
He's inconsequential. I mean,
exactly.
We've talked so much. We're not going to. We'll get to Daemon later, but I think we talked so much about that impotence and the torturous psychological effect that feelings of impotence have had on Daemon. Tristan, because I think you track Criston Cole more and more closely than Maggie or I do. Do you think that this sort of reality check of when he sees what Dragonfire does, when he sees how inconsequential all of these ground soldiers are, do you think that this, even if he is removed from his post or fired or whatever, do you think this will radicalize him in any direction, seeing the power of dragons?
If anything, if he errs on the side of humanity, he might be more reluctant to send masses of troops against dragons. Maybe if he had seen this before, maybe he doesn't use his men as a decoy to draw out a dragon, regardless of what that means. I think it was a sound strategic decision. If like we're talking about, he doesn't care about the well-being of other people. But if it does lean him in that direction, absolutely, it makes sense that he would be like, we have to avoid this kind of fighting at all costs. Or it could go the other way, be like, just send a dragon at him. That'll teach him, But I think he's not going to be the same character after this. And I'm curious to know what the repercussions are going to be for him as Hand. If Aegon is still in his right mind, what's going to be said?
Sure.
He's going to blame Kristen Cole.
Sure.
But somebody's going to have to pay for the king nearly being dead or almost, or dying or being maimed, whatever is going to come about this.
Head's got to roll.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is why I wanted to zoom in on that character level, because it's not as simple as just saying the Greens won, because even between these three green bastards, Cole loses. Aegon certainly seems to have lost. Aemond seems all right, but we asked a poll question about Aemond, which I think will let us drill a little bit more into him, about Aemond shooting fire, this little moment of ambiguity. Who do you think Aemond wanted dead more in that moment? Aegon or Rhaenys? What did the
If
audience
this isn't
say?
100%, I'll be upset.
It is, in fact, 100% Aegon. And I totally agree. I don't think there's any ambiguity. I like the way you frame that, Kim. There's no ambiguity there, I don't think. I mean, I think Aemond recognizes, okay, I can make this look like I'm trying to kill Rhaenys. And Aegon was in the way. But I think it's very obviously clear that is his intended target.
When I said ambiguity, I think I meant because of the ambiguity of the source material, because obviously we don't have we don't have like an office cutaway testimonial of Aemond saying, "Oh yeah, of course I was Aemond."
No,
for my brother."
there's nothing, and from what I remember, there's nothing to indicate that it even was Vaegar's dragon fire that hit Aegon.
No,
right?
I don't think there are many like eyewitnesses who are contributing to that part of the history, but he does seem pleased with the outcome. There is some. I reread that section right before the episode actually, and there is absolutely some showboating from him after this.
Sure.
There are enough breadcrumbs, but I think this is another, like we talked about last week with the Alicent Rhaenyra meeting, I think this is another beautiful, smart, seamless addition that's totally in line with the source material, but gives us that sort of character moment that can only live within a real-time narrative. I absolutely loved this.
Well, and if it had been recorded in history, like Aemond would suffer significant ramifications for it. So it makes sense that it wouldn't be recorded in the book.
Also, absolutely makes sense and tracks with what we've seen from his character so far, between being humiliated that last episode, from really showing that wonderful scene in High Valyrian where they're at the small council meeting, and him just absolutely smacking the shit out of Aegon.
That was so good.
In a way that was so good because it was so private, because presumably nobody else in there understood exactly what was being said. It wasn't just a character assassination to everybody else. He did it to himself. He went straight for the id, the ego, and the super ego of Aegon and torched them all and made him look like an absolute idiot. Personally.
Brutal.
There are very few burns that hurt worse than the ones that you just feel in your heart and in your soul. There's no way that he recovers from that, right?
No.
So that was awesome. That was his revenge. And then Aemond is like, okay, I've done that to you. Now I'm going to go do the job that I am actually set out to do and go win this war. And he gets to have that, despite being, jealous of Aegon being king and, having this ability because he's the king, sort of pick on him as he wants. Aemond's time to shine is in battle and in strategy, and he gets to have that. And when he sees Aegon fly onto the battlefield, he's like, are you kidding me? Like, you're gonna do this to me here now
take this
too?
away from me. Yeah,
you came to the wrong place.
We're in international waters now.
Yeah,
I have the bigger dragon. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think all of that pride kind of swells up, and that's why he does what he does. And if you're him, or maybe even the public loves Aemond. right? Because he is the secret weapon. He is the thing that is winning them this war. Is what give him and Vagar are what gives them the advantage. We've heard the small council and everybody else talk about that so much. Is anybody really going to be upset if Aemond is the king?
No.
If he, gets rid of this one thing.
He's a better mascot. He's their Uncle Sam. That's
Exactly.
their recruitment. Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, because Aegon screws up this plan, and that was our other poll question. Whose antagonism pushes Aegon over the edge and into battle? That's Maggie's wording. I was very impressed by that.
Thanks.
And the options were Aemond and his taunts in High Valyrian, or Alicent and her scoffs and impatience. What the audience think?
The audience said 58% Aemond and 42% Alicent.
That's pretty close.
So pretty evenly split.
Okay.
And I know we're talking a lot about Aemond and how much that affected Aegon, and I think it did. But I'm with the 42%. I really think Alicent was the final straw there, because I think ultimately Aegon is more than he's got mommy issues. Like, he wants the approval of his mother so bad. Like, if you think back to season 1, after Viserys dies and Aegon is like literally hiding under a table because he doesn't want to be king, it's Alicent who convinces him to do it. It's Alicent who says, hey, you're going to be killed if you don't take this throne. And it's like all these talks that he has with her about like why he has to be king. And then she sort of helps him understand how great it's going to feel. Here's the special fancy dagger. Here's your crown, my sweet angel baby boy, right? Like, I think it's his mother more than anything that really pushes him. And so I think her sort of like going back on that and saying, no, you shouldn't be doing anything. You should just sit back and learn. He has a big, fuck you, mom, I do what I want. Like, I think it's that makes him feel the most infantilized and immobilized and is there what's the verb for impotent? Impotized? Emasculated. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Oh my God. it's like 9 p.m.
You're riffing.
Like that makes sense to me. So I really think it's that talk with Alicent. I mean, also just like I'm cheating because like chronologically that happens second. But I really think that if it weren't for that, he wouldn't have gone into battle the way that he did.
I think there's a finer point to that even. I think you're right. Aemond is who pushes him over the edge. And instead of pushing him over the edge, the conversation with Alicent simply fails to pull him back up. I think this is, instead of Scar clawing down and snatching Mufasa off of the edge, right? This is just her simply not extending a hand, right? She's just being truthful. She is just
so
telling him the truth. I mean, it is a wonderful scene. A couple episodes ago we were talking about where's the dialogue, where's the good back and forth, where's the volleys of like the good Game of Thrones conversations. And right before we opened up the episode, Cam and Maggie and I were just talking, and we all came to the conclusion that this is the closest thing to Cersei we've had since the actual Game of Thrones, an early Game of Thrones, right? Before Cersei kind of goes off the edge and becomes the Queen Regent and stuff. Back when she's still like scheming and stuff and really leaning into her role as the one puppeteering and being the puppet master behind the scenes. Alicent literally looks at her son who has come to her for that. He expects her to pull him back up and basically sit him back on his seat and smooth out his hair and say, it's going to be okay, sweetie. But instead she's like, grow up. Like, you want all this power, but to what end? You're not needed. You've got people who are handling all of this stuff for you on your behalf. You literally don't need to lift a finger, and nobody needs to tell you what's going on because you don't have any impact right here. You are so small. She gives him the talking to that is similar to the realization that Kristen Cole comes to. He is useless. He's inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. And her willingness to tell it like it is, and not give him that support, that safety net. I don't think that he necessarily wants her approval. I think he wants approval in his own right to stop feeling that imposter syndrome. But she doesn't give him the feel-good moment that he wanted.
I see what you're saying. Okay. So what? I edit. I agree with the logic there. Still, though, it is Alicent that does it.
It's a compound fracture.
Yeah. What do you think,
It's both
Cam?
of them. Well, it's interesting because Aemond he's both edges of the Oreo. Because I think he starts this with the High Valyrian, and he ends this by big dogging him in the sky.
Yeah.
Even though, like, yes, he puts on the armor. I don't think Aegon makes the decision to really go full bore. Maybe he was going there to be a mascot, blow off some steam, blow some fire. I don't think he was going to go in for the kill until he saw Aemond, and then it became almost a competition between them.
He wasn't like going there planning to kill Aemond. He just wanted to like go and demonstrate that he could be king.
I mean, he might have just flown around a little like a hot air balloon and gone home. I don't think he was necessarily going there to get in the mud of combat.
He probably would have like breathed some fire.
That's
and,
what I'm saying. Made an appearance. You know,
He probably had no idea that there would be another dragon.
Yeah, he had no idea about anything. Like he was just like, "I'm gonna show up." Yeah,
and
okay.
Here's where we need to move. We need to quiet things down. Move to a sad segment. We have to do an in memoriam here, and I want to cede the floor to Tristan because the only thing I felt when Rhaenys died was sad for Tristan, and it reminded me a little bit of when I saw Force Awakens with Tristan and had to feel the misery wafting off of him as Han Solo died.
Spoiler.
But you liked Rhaenys so much. So I guess the question is, do you think her storyline felt complete? Was this satisfying? What did you think of this end for this character?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely the storyline does not feel complete. It's not satisfying. And I think that's where the power of the moment actually comes from. Is because she had so much left to do. And I know we kind of talked about this earlier, so I'll try to refrain from retreading everything. But she, to me, is the voice of reason that's on the side of the Black. She's the one who knows how to sort of be the intermediary between the council and Rhaenyra. She knows that Rhaenyra is going to make mistakes, but she can pull everybody back in and ultimately help direct Rhaenyra to making the right calls too, right? I mean, she knows that the right call here is to, meet the other side in battle. And she says, you know what? I'm also the most experienced dragon rider. I've got this. I make the most sense. If we're going to make a statement, we have to do it with our biggest piece. That happens to be me, right? That is sound tactics, I think. And the fact that we're going to lose that in this moment, and we're not going to have that voice of reason anymore. She also pulled Corlys in and reined him in when needed.
Ooh,
right?
That's true.
She kept. It's like you remember in Spider-Man 2 when Doc Ock has to keep using his tentacles to keep the reactor from like exploding.
Yeah,
that's her, right? she's holding everything in, right? She's the Skims of the Blacks, if you will, right? Giving everything shape, holding it in. It wants to bust at the seams, but she's there to cater to it and make sure that they still, keep everything in sight. And without that, I feel like the repercussions of it are going to be that we see a lot more rash decisions being made from Rhaenyra and team. And there's going to be more risks taken. There's going to be more anger, tempers flaring. Rhaenyra is probably going to have to come down on her council. If she doesn't, they're going to betray her. Or start acting without her. It really does create a vacuum that I think needs to be filled by somebody like Daemon to come back in. And Daemon's no replacement for Rhaenys. He's the opposite of a voice of reason.
A little bit, yeah.
They hated each other for that difference.
Right. And so this is something that could drive Rhaenyra and Daemon closer together. But obviously Daemon's got his own thing going on at Harrenhal, and I don't know if he's contemplating betrayal of her, or if he's trying to face the fact that the feelings that he had of betrayal are bad and not desirable. It's kind of unclear to me right now where he's at in his head.
Yeah.
And so, but I just think it's such a huge loss for the Blacks, both morally and tactically. I think she had much more to do as a character, as sort of the original person who was denied the throne, who was able to navigate that well, and come out as, on the other side as still a good person.
For real, that's true.
She hasn't really committed any atrocities. We see her,
not that we know of. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we see her basically accepting Corlys's bastard, despite that being something that you might otherwise get really upset at, especially with how close they are. I said before the show started, she was fulfilling sort of a Catelyn role to me in the way that her actress was situated and sort of the role that she played as this voice of reason character, and my mother character to Rhaenyra by that point in time. And I think it's going to be detrimental to say the least, to the Black's future moving forward.
And she was even more level-headed than that because Catelyn never accepted Jon.
Yeah.
She didn't hold his face lovingly and say, you should be promoted.
Yeah. No, this is so true. And I think it's also important to remember that, like, one of the biggest reasons that Rhaenyra goes to King's Landing at the end of last episode to go, like, talk to Alicent is partly because of their own history and stuff, but also because of Rhaenys. Because remember, Rhaenys was in King's Landing when Viserys died, and so she's able to report back to Rhaenyra that, like, hey, Alicent seems pretty convinced that Viserys changed his mind. That helps Rhaenyra know that she has to do everything she can to seek peace before going to war. She keeps her level-headed. I mean, Rhaenyra is level-headed on her own, but I think Rhaenys is really essential in helping keep that. And even when after Luke dies, like, she calms Daemon down and says, hey, yeah, Rhaenyra's off grieving her son, like, give her a minute, it's gonna be fine. She's really essential to keeping everybody level-headed here, and I think it's gonna be tough stuff going forward.
Yeah, she leaves Rhaenyra in a position where she's more rash with fewer dragons and fewer advisors, fewer checks.
Yeah, we really
on that
didn't
power.
talk about the loss of their biggest dragon.
The giant dragon, that was rough.
From the show perspective, really cool way to give us even more insight into the connection of the dragons. We got that with, like, Sunfire, and, you know, even with a drunken Aegon, right? They're still very excited to see each other. It's really cool. And then when Meleys and Rhaenys are getting ready to go to battle, like, they share that, like, tender moment.
Oh yeah,
and then, you know, when she's dying, like, making direct eye contact as they're falling to the ground, and even before that, whenever they think that they kind of dealt with Vhagar for a second. And then, you know, she's scoping out the battlefield. And what I got from that was she's like, okay, we did enough of a job here to where I think we've defended the fort. I think we can go back. And that's whenever Vhagar activates Jaws mode again.
Terrifying.
And you know, then we see that moment where they make eye contact and both sort of come to terms with their death simultaneously. Really cool way to showcase those bonds, which are talked about a lot in the books. So it's really cool to actually see what that means.
Totally.
But it sucks that it's in death.
Yeah, because we've really gotten to see a lot of that with Daemon and his dragon, but we don't really get to see it much with the other dragons, because Vhagar has a connection with Aemond, but they're just, like, both mean.
Sure.
So it's nice to see some of that too, but it is sad that it has
Speaking
to happen
of
through
Daemon,
death. Yes, let's talk about Daemon.
Speaking of Daemon,
let's talk about
our
him.
last poll question is, what's eating Daemon Targaryen? Is it guilt about his past, his sketchy past, or is it him possibly questioning his loyalty to Rhaenyra? What did the audience think?
Well, and of course, in this question, we're referring to all his visions that he's having.
His Luigi's Mansion side quest.
Yes.
That's what I saw it called online.
It's so good.
Very funny.
33% of our audience thinks he's worried about, he's dealing with the guilt of his past. 67%
Really?
are thinking about his loyalty to Rhaenyra.
Wow, I did not expect that at all.
Yeah,
Wow.
I don't know what my answer is to this question. It's tough because I feel like obviously Rhaenyra is really present in these visions that he's having. We keep seeing young Rhaenyra, but I don't think that's really him questioning his loyalty. I think he's more like feeling guilty about his past and how it has affected and is still affecting Rhaenyra and his relationship with her. I don't know if he's actually questioning his own loyalty to her. That's not what the visions tell me.
He cuts her head off.
That's a good point.
But he's, like, mad at her for calling him out. But I don't think he's, like, saying I want Rhaenyra gone. And I think also, like, what this vision allows him to do is sort of live out the possibility of okay, what if Rhaenyra was gone? And I think he doesn't like it.
I don't know if he doesn't like it. I think he's scared by it, but I think he's on the precipice, right? Because this is and could go one way or the other. I didn't really know how to interpret the scene. I mean, obviously he's still going and meeting with other houses to try to get them to to Rhaenyra's cause.
Sure.
But
one enemy at a time.
Yeah, exactly. And just seeing that happen. I mean, being back in the throne room where he's denied the throne, where he actually did kill, Corlys's brother to defend Rhaenyra's honor. Now he does it to Rhaenyra. basically in the exact same motion of his sword.
Totally.
Right? You remember the scene where he's like,
I
using
remember.
his tongue.
I remember. That was such a
So,
good scene.
I mean, it was a callback to that moment as well, because that was really where he doubled down and said, I am loyal to Rhaenyra.
Totally.
I'm going to defend her claim like this. And now he's like, okay, well, did I make the right call? I'm playing with this. We've never seen him hurt her before, and
True.
now he hurts her at her most innocent. But
He
then she
did
still
choke her
keeps
out
talking.
at the end of last season.
Oh, that's true. He did choke her.
You're right. I'm forgetting that
We all tried to forget.
little
Yeah.
tidbit.
So, but I see what you're saying.
I know what you
though.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I was really struck by the costume choice here. I want to talk about that for a second, because in the first vision in the last episode where we see young Rhaenyra for the first time, she is wearing a dress that she wore when she was the youngest we saw her in the show. She's wearing a dress that she wore when she was like a 14, 15-year-old kid. Gross. I mean, the whole thing's gross, so whatever. In this vision, she's wearing a black dress that's the same dress as one that present day Rhaenyra has worn before. So he is seeing her like dressed up in like current day Rhaenyra, but still in the body and face of
He
this.
still sees
the
her as a
child.
child.
Yes. So I don't know what that says about the poll question, but I thought it was interesting, and I appreciate the detail that they're the way that they're thinking it through. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how I want to interpret it. I mean, I guess it's like he still sees her as a child, and he doesn't know how to deal with that. Because I think he's much more sympathetic to child Rhaenyra than he is to adult Rhaenyra. He fights a lot more with adult Rhaenyra than he does with child Rhaenyra. So I think he's maybe grappling with that a bit.
Well, I mean, there might be a lighter spin on this, despite all the red flags. Maybe he's connecting those dots because he was more fond of. There was a less complicated relationship with young Rhaenyra. So if he's seeing young Rhaenyra in older Rhaenyra's clothes, maybe he's trying to meld those in his head and remind himself why he walked down this path and what side he's on.
But it's not working, because in that whole scene, she is trying to talk to him in High Valyrian, which is like their special shared language.
Yeah,
and he can't
understand.
hear her. He can't hear her. So so that connection is broken. He can't connect with her the way that he used to. He can't actually square that circle. He can't put the two together. He can't mix old Rhaenyra with new Rhaenyra in his head. And I think that's why he cuts her head off. I don't think it's because he wants, now I'm thinking about it, I don't think it's because he wants to see her dead. I think it's because he doesn't know how to conceive of this in his head. I think it's more metaphorical than him just being like, I want to be in charge. Yeah.
They found a way to put some of the ambiguity of the source material, which has been so exciting in those discussions of that book over on Patreon that Maggie and I are doing. I feel like they found a way to put that back into the show. It's incredibly ballsy to give one of your lead characters this sort of side quest that's lasting so long. I figured when we saw Young Rhaenyra, that was the finale of the Vision Quest thing.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to get more.
I'm so excited that we're still there because we're doubling down on it. Not only did we bring Young Rhaenyra back for this second episode, but now we add in one of his previous wives, who's also dead, Baela.
That's right.
We see Baela when he hallucinates the woman serving the wine.
And I said last week, I was like, he probably feels bad that she, it's not Baela, that's his daughter. You're thinking Lena.
I'm sorry. I wrote it down wrong in my
these
notes.
These damn names, man.
Lena.
I think I said last week, like, he probably feels bad about Lena's death because he got her pregnant. And lo and behold, we see him feeling bad about it right here.
Sure. And I'm really taken by that because I think doing it for a second episode means we're going to do it for a third. I mean, obviously, we see he's still in Harrenhal, but I'm excited to see how far this can go, because we were teasing this last week. We were trying to work out, where does the Vision side quest go? And I was sort of leading to this question of, if you could bring back any character, which would be the one to break Daemon? Like, break him meaning he goes crazy. Maybe he dies. Maybe he's possessed by a ghost. Wherever the hell this side quest is going, what would be the person? And what would they be doing that he would have to see that would break him from his past? Do you guys have any more clarity on that this week?
Well, first I want to say we also didn't mention the Aemond thing that he gets in this vision as well.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I want to mention that before we get to the big bad, because I think we talked so much about Aemond in our battle discussion about like this journey he's been on, and we've talked about the parallels between Daemon and Aemond before. So I liked them bringing that here, and you not not quite sure. Is the guy following, is that young Daemon with his long hair, or is that Aemond? And you get closer and closer. Oh, it's both. Just the same way that he can't square young Rhaenyra with current Rhaenyra, I think he's kind of having the same trouble with himself and Aemond, and like is fearing what he could become or what he's turned Aemond into. So that's another fun layer.
Yeah,
to
and it's a
add.
good callback to discussions that we had during last season, because we pretty much said that. We were talking about how it really felt like Aemond was being set up to be the spiritual heir apparent to Daemon, between being the second son, having this sort of a cool edgelord personality. You know, you've got Hoodie Daemon and then you've got Eye Patch Aemond, right? Like they fill certain roles of being like the boogeyman enforcer that works for one side but has their own motivations, right? Sort of a wild card. And we see Aemond creating his Daemon-esque legend now, right? From the decision to, torch Aegon, right? I think that Aemond, and I think we talked about this last season, Aemond seems to be shaping up to be a Daemon that actually has some agency and effectiveness, right?
Yes, totally. Which is dangerous.
Daemon is totally ineffective, but we did talk about a lot during first season his own impotence. I don't think Aemond, at least in his big book actions or big time story plot actions, he doesn't show a lot of the impotence. I mean, he has that weak side of him, that we saw at the brothel, but that's buried way underneath. He's doing all of this other stuff to sort of, compensate for that, but it's not like Daemon where it feels kind of cloying. Like, look at me, brother. I did this for you. But to answer your actual I think that is a fun aside, Maggie. I like that they actually gave a nod to it. But I think to answer your question, Cam, I think the real boogeyman that would come back and could destroy Daemon would be Viserys.
100%.
They could play with that in so many different ways. I mean, I think you mentioned last time that these visions sort of feel like the Christmas Carol, right? That takes Daemon through these memories. Viserys went through so many different permutations of being, young and healthy, sort of naive, to he has to make the succession decision and start showing some backbone, and then he starts to succumb to his illness, and then by the end he's wearing that weird half gold mask, and he looks sort of like a cadaver already. You could have him go through all of those different seasons of Viserys' life that Daemon witnessed and sort of antagonized him all throughout. You talk about having to reckon with your actions of the past. I mean, the way that he treated Viserys and made his life so much harder than it had to be at that moment, that's something that if he has to grapple with, I think that would be really compelling, because he can then draw a direct parallel to the hell that he's giving Rhaenyra, right? If he would just acquiesce, and instead of being petulant and railing against just siding with her and doing what she needs, as he did with Viserys, right, which he didn't do for Viserys, maybe him reckoning with his inability to do that for Viserys allows him to be more directly helpful to Rhaenyra.
I love that. Yeah, because I was trying to pay attention to what we're doing with this mirage of Rhaenyra that we're seeing for the second time. The first time it was just sort of the shock value, and of course the symbolism of her with the child. But this time there was a mocking tone, and then he attacked her with violence. But I don't think that would matter much with Viserys. They're not going to duel. I don't think it's enough to just see him mocking, but I love that idea of seeing stages of Viserys, because I was trying to dig into the second level. Yes, I think Viserys is the answer, but what would he do that would break Daemon? And I think those moments sort of dotted throughout Daemon's life and the people that he's seeing so far in these mirage moments. I think it's all about the people that he views Viserys chose over him.
Well, totally.
Like, he chose Rhaenyra over him. And if we are to believe what Alicent said in the end of season 1, then he would have chosen Aegon over him, which means by extension, he chose Aemond over Daemon. So if you could assemble all those people, I think that would be your Christmas Carol in the next episode, all of these people who superseded him to the throne.
Right. Well, even
and his brother's affection, maybe that's more the point.
Well, yes, because at the end of the scene with young Rhaenyra in the vision, she says, like, I forget the exact wording, but something like, my father loved me more than you, or something.
Yes,
he had more
yes.
love for me than he ever did for you, or something like that. I think that's the thing that he goes, all right, your head's coming off. Like, that's the thing that puts him over the edge. So it's all going to come back to that. Like, his stuff with Rhaenyra is so complicated and is about her in her own right, but a lot of it really goes back to Viserys.
It's all I want to see this season.
I mean,
more than the battles. I just want Viserys back.
If they're gonna bring back Millie Alcock, they're gonna bring back Paddy Considine. They're gonna
miss
do it.
him.
Me too.
I do too.
Me too.
So
There's
much.
no one filling that role, and I think
I know.
this might be a good transition to the last thing I want to play with, which is one of my signature dumb curveballs. Because maybe that's what I'm looking for. Maybe I'm missing Viserys in this season, because the character I could not stop thinking about throughout this entire episode was Stannis Baratheon. And I think he was sprinkled. I think you kind of chop him into pieces and sprinkle him through this episode. And I want to chase those down, because this is us really hitting our stride in the second season of House of the Dragon. And I think Stannis Baratheon represents Game of Thrones really hitting its stride in the second season of Game of Thrones, because I view him as sort of the herald of that season. I think what he brings to the ensemble is
Child sacrifice.
he
There is
brings
that.
a level of brutality. I think he single-handedly
Yes.
like introduces the themes and ideas that are so core to that season. But even though we've met some new people so far this season, I don't think any of them are at a major level like Stannis is.
No.
So I'm seeing shades of Stannis pop up within our evolving existing cast. And I want to try to chase those down, because the first shade of Stannis that I saw in this episode was within Daemon. Because we see him in Harrenhal now. He's haggard and haunted by the supernatural. And I think that almost positions Alice Rivers as his Melisandre.
I see.
Because these characters, when I call them like heralds, Stannis brings the supernatural. He almost brings the truth of any sort of religion in this world into the show. Because in Game of Thrones, when Melisandre does the weird ghost baby thing that kills Renly, that is the first confirmation that there is a god in this world who is real, that miracles happen and supernatural shit happens. Like beyond the White Walkers, that's the first thing where the rubber hits the road.
It's like the actual proof, yeah.
And I think that's what we're teeing up with Alice Rivers here, with the the kind of soft introduction of the supernatural. But the thing that matters with Stannis and Melisandre is that quote that I brought up a couple weeks ago in a Game of Thrones episode, where Stannis is so fragile and principled that he doesn't bend, he breaks.
Oh,
and the
right.
thing that represents sort of the shattering of his moral code, in the same way Daemon seems to be on the roller coaster slowly moving to the top, where he will reach his breaking point, hopefully through a Paddy Considine return, is Stannis's infidelity.
Right.
That's where he really breaks bad, and it's just he's flailing for the next 3 or 4 seasons. That infidelity we haven't seen with Daemon. I mean, he doesn't seem to be attracted to Alice Rivers. We haven't had that yet. The infidelity we did see, sort of, in this episode is back in the Red Keep with Alicent and Cole.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Where she, I mean, the realm views her as this, freshly grieving dowager mother,
Widow,
whatever.
yeah.
Right. And
So you're saying you see Stannis in Alicent.
I see that Stannis Melisandre thing, that like breaking point within the Alicent Cole relationship, because this is a less magical show than Game of Thrones was. There's no White Walkers so far.
Dragons.
I was gonna say the dragons are the magic.
There are
here.
dragons, but there are no resurrections. There's no Jon Snow coming back. There's no Hardhome, other people coming back as zombies. No gods and miracles so far that we've seen. So if I'm looking at Alicent and Cole and trying to map like a Stannis Melisandre, I think this is where the metaphor becomes revealing. Because in that dynamic, Stannis is the one who's morally fragile and ambitious and a bystander to power, which sounds exactly like Daemon. And what Melisandre is to Stannis there is kind of a cheat code to supercharge, enable, and destroy him. But the fun part about Alicent and Cole is that they are both that to each other.
Right,
They are
yeah.
both morally fragile, ambitious bystanders to power, and they are both the other one's cheat code that seems to be supercharging and destroying them.
That's why they're both so tortured. It's
Yes.
not one of them playing the other.
Yes, so the supernatural is happening here without that. It's such a great sleight of hand.
Interesting, to continue talking about Cole and Allison, I'm curious, what the repercussions of her taking Plan B is going to be if he finds out about that. Like, where do those two characters go from there? It links in with that ambition that you're talking about. I think it's more directly relevant to where Daemon is right now, because the ambition that Allison and Kristen Cole have is sort of, like I said, it's by chance. It's sort of reluctant, right? And both of their ambition is directly related to their relationship with Rhaenyra. Cole's ambition is born out of hatred for Rhaenyra. Alicent's ambition is born out of the idea that she knew that Viserys loved Rhaenyra more than he could ever have loved her. But then this thought that at the very last minute, maybe something changed and he actually had a turn of heart and realized that she and her heir are really where he wanted to back for the future, right? So her ambition is born out of really wanting that to be true and basically sticking it to Rhaenyra, saying, haha, I won this round. I think that evolves over time. Cole is just sort of, he hates to hate, and Alicent is just kind of going, shit, we've got this army, we're trying to fight for this throne. My kid's an idiot.
Which one?
Yeah, exactly. This is leading to deaths of my, line. My father's basically been exiled. What do I really have at this point? Both of their ambition has sort of been stymied, and now they just have to deal with where they are at as a result of having that ambition, which I think for both of them is worse off, despite their symbolic positions as hand and queen, dowager queen, whatever.
Well, I think also to sort of complicate this and add a little bit more to the mix is, I think in my details, my memories of Stannis might be a bit fuzzy, so if I'm totally wrong, you can just tell me. But I sort of think that you could also say there's a bit of Stannis in Aegon as this like person who did not think they were like eligible for the throne, didn't think that the throne was really theirs, but all of a sudden found themselves in a position where they did feel like they could claim the throne based on deaths of random people and legitimacy of things, and is then spurred on by a powerful woman. For Aegon, it's Alicent, and for Stannis, it's Melisandre. And then you've got the weird mommy issues that Aegon has anyway, so you can add the weird seduction thing in there too. So I think there's a bit of that there as well. So Stannis is sort of present everywhere throughout this, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's that breaking point. I think we're hitting our stride, and he represented an accelerant in season 2, and I'm seeing that throughout the cast in House of the Dragon.
And it is fun
Speaking
because
of accelerant,
yes,
interesting to see how the insides of the dragons basically have this fuel in them, and they explode when they fall.
Yes, that was very, very cool. I did really love that. I love the way
gross.
that different movies and TV interpret the way how the fire comes out of the dragon. I think they had a lot of fun with that in the Hobbit movies, the way that Smaug's like belly chest sort of like builds up and like kind of charges up Godzilla style and the spews of fire is really cool. Having Stannis throughout this is interesting too, because Stannis really is like representative of somebody who thinks he's on the side of good, thinks he's this morally on his high horse, like is a better person than the scheming Lannisters and the crazy Targaryens and all this stuff, and yet then he becomes sort of corrupted and represents like the ultimate corruption of power. And that's where we already are with this Targaryen family. Everybody's messy, everybody's hungry for power, and I mean, Rhaenyra is trying to do the right thing, but she's still nuts in her own way. So
you don't have a battle like this halfway through season 2 if your show's going to go 12 seasons.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This felt like kind of a mission statement of we're careening towards maybe 3 or 4 seasons.
Right. And I think by having us think about Stannis, I think that kind of helps us, I don't know, it helps legitimize and make the speed at which we're moving through these ideas make more sense somehow. So
Yes.
I like that comparison, Cam. I think that's really, really cool.
Well, that was just a little curveball for the end.
But
I got so much out of this episode.
I did too.
The red dragon and the gold. This season has so turned around, I think, for all of us. Like the first two were a little shaky.
Yeah.
These last two have been crazy
They've
good.
been fantastic.
I'm so excited for the next four. I feel like they're really hitting their stride now. Oh, I'm so excited. This was awesome.
Me too. Do we know anything about, I mean, I didn't watch the trailer for next episode because I don't like to do that, so maybe this question is dumb, but do we know anything about the next episode? Like, because going into
We
this...
do, because we read the book.
Yeah, but I don't know how they're structuring it. And like going into this episode, we knew it was going to be a big battle. But like, do we know anything about the next ones or anything? I guess not.
I didn't
Because
watch
we don't
the
know the
trailer.
title. We don't know anything. Yeah. Well, that's just exciting, isn't it?
If you want to know what happens next, go check out our Fire and Blood episodes over on
There you go.
Patreon, where we talk
Boo,
about the
don't
book.
do it. Spoilers, boo.
We're 9 volumes deep in that discussion, and those are all blockbuster, big, analytical, fun chats that we have over there. We also did an episode this past Sunday talking about art that makes us feel patriotic. It was
That's
kind
right,
of a
yeah.
4th of July special. That's like an hour and a half long, just... I don't. It's a bonanza.
We're riffing.
We go through like 65 works of art. It's a big, fun discussion. Feels like a real traditional ass podcast.
It was
Go
a fun
check
time.
that out. And on Fridays, of course, we're continuing to roll chapter by chapter through Game of Thrones. If you liked my Tolkien theory and the last one, I've got another one this week, and it's even better. It's even more tricky and even more of a misdirection.
It was
Not on
very
purpose. It just happened that way.
I'm
He
very
was
proud
getting
of you.
real tricky with Arya. And I realized what he was doing. He was doing a Tolkien thing.
It was fun. It was fun.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us for this 4th discussion of House of the Dragon Season 2. We'll be right back here next week on Tuesday to discuss Episode 5.
Yes, and if you missed our polls on social media, you can do the same thing next time. We always put them up on Sunday night right after the episode airs, so you have like 24 hours to participate before we always record Monday nights. A little peek behind the curtain there. So you can check out our Instagram.
Peek behind the tired curtain. Spoilers.
Second Breakfast Pod is Instagram, where we post all of our polls. We also post some of them sometimes on the YouTube community page, so check that as well. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe and all of that. It helps a lot. Let us know what you thought of this episode and our conversation in the comments down below. If you're not on YouTube, send us an email, secondbreakfastpod@gmail.com, and we love to hear your feedback and incorporate it into the discussion. I think that's everything.
Cool. Thank you for listening,
Thank you,
and we'll
Cam.
see you on
Thank you,
Friday
Tristan.
for a brand new episode.